Please rise in body or spirit for the reading of the gospel. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me." Then he will say to those at his left hand, "You who are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you did not give me clothing, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they also will answer, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me." And these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. Please be seated for the moment of silence.
Live in charity and steadfast love. Live in charity, God will dwell with you. Live in charity and steadfast love. Live in charity, God will dwell with you.
So while today's text is a little lighter, maybe, than the last two parables, relatively speaking, I suppose, they share something in common with the past two parables: surprise. So 2 Sundays ago, we had The king who was throwing a wedding for his son and was surprised that no one came. And then there was the surprise later in the text where there was one attendant who didn't come in wedding robes and surprised everybody. And Anne gave us a beautiful flip and reframe that maybe that person was Jesus and not following the ways of the potential king and the oppressor. Last week we had another bit of surprise where somehow the bridegroom is late, and then it's the bridesmaids' fault, but even more so for 5 of them who didn't bring extra oil. And Anne reminded us that are we to believe that Jesus is telling us not to care for each other and not to show up for each other and provide in community? Or maybe it was that the 5 bridesmaids who went off and tried to get more oil and missed the bridegroom listened to other voices than the one that invited them to meet the bridegroom. So where is the surprise in the parable we have today? The response of the sheep and the goat are the same. Neither of them knew that they were or were not caring for the Son of Man. I'm familiar with the goat's reaction. Whoa! When did we not feed you? Jesus, we love you. Had we seen you, we would have clothed you, bathed you, we would have done anything for you, but when was this? I need receipts. But it wasn't until this reading that I realized the sheep had the exact same response. Jesus, when was it that we saw you hungry and fed you? When was it that we saw you naked and clothed you? When were you imprisoned and we came to visit you? When was this? The reactions are the same. Which is interesting because often when I've heard this text preached on or taught on, it's do all the right things so that you can be seen as the righteous at the right hand of God. But the sheep didn't know they were righteous. They just did it. So it could have been that both the sheep and the goat were doing the exact same thing, where they were waiting for Jesus to come to them. And they were checking and they were waiting, because this is in the future, right? The Son of Man will come back. And so perhaps they were waiting for the Son of Man to return. And both of them were like, okay, so we were kind of told it's going to look this way, so keep an eye out for this. I'll take care of this, you take care of that. And if you see him, you please tell me and I will come running. And they're all just waiting. But here's the difference. The sheep just responded to what was before them. Not because they were told to in order to see the Son of Man, but we're told they just did. And I feel bad for the goats. I mean, they're cute too. We had a goat once named Wanda. It was really great. And they're cute, right? But beyond their cuteness, I feel bad because they thought they were doing what was right. They didn't intentionally not feed people. They didn't intentionally ignore. They didn't say, oh, you're not worthy. They were focused on other things. And maybe there's a variety of reasons, but I cannot imagine what they felt when the Son of Man returns and says, you did none of these things for me. Christ standing before them saying, you didn't care for me. I would be heartbroken to my very being if Christ returns and says, Morgan, where were you? And I had all these lists of things of where I had been and how I had tried, and yet Christ said, for even one of these that you did not respond to, you did not do it to me. Oh, What agony, what longing, what regret. And the sheep, also very impressive that the sheep aren't like, oh yes, that was us, we did that, you are welcome, we did it. Well, no, they humbly confess their confusion. When did we do that? When did we care for you? And the surprise or shock that maybe they felt to hear, when you did it to the least of my siblings, you did it unto me. And maybe wondering about, well, oh, okay, I guess maybe I did. Wow. And then we hear judgment. Judgment for the righteous. You shall inherit eternity with God. And judgment for the accursed. You shall inherit the fire made for the devil. And we wonder once again, why does Jesus come across sometimes as so confusing and punishing? But I wonder, after simply naming what had been, right? That there were those who took care of the least of these and those who didn't. That if the judgment we're hearing is rather just a statement of what was already there and it's being exposed. That there's separation when we don't care for each other from what we were designed for. To love one another, to love ourselves, to love God. And when that doesn't happen, there is separation from the divine, within our very beings and within the cosmos. And so maybe Jesus isn't actually just saying, you get heaven, you get hell, even though hell's not actually named, that's often what's ascribed. Maybe what's being named is, when we're not there for each other, the world isn't right. And when the world isn't right, it can feel like hell here on earth. So how did the sheep get to be sheep? It's not the goats' fault, they're just goats. But how did sheep get to be sheep? I wonder if they never lost sight of their belovedness. Or the belovedness in others. I don't know about you, but there are times in my day when I will see somebody in need and go, okay, do I have money? Do I have time? Do I have energy? Do they deserve this? Will this be used well? Well, I'm a pastor and I just preached about it, so I really, really should do this because then I'm a hypocrite. And so, yeah, and by that time, the light's green, I've already gone, and that person is still back asking for help. So I wonder if the sheep became sheep because they saw a need and said, I see you. Here, I have extra. No other questions. Simply because they would hope somebody would do that for them. Fairly certain that's maybe what's being said because I don't like it. And that's usually how Jesus works with me. Sorry. But I don't like it because for me, I'm a part of systems that tell me some people are deserving and some people aren't, or that's not the best way to help. Give to an organization, that's better, or, oh gosh, how many times have we helped that person? Are they starting to take advantage? None of these are bad questions, but they're not questions present in today's text, and so I have to grapple with it. And I have to acknowledge I'd probably be a goat more than a sheep, and I don't really like that, even though I do a great ma. I don't think I'd make a great goat in life, because it's not what we're called for. It's not what we were created for. Anne's sermon a couple weeks ago on forgiveness, where she said, just do it. Thanks for that, by the way. I think it's similar here. Just love. Just care for each other. And I struggle with boundaries, y'all, so I often suck at saying what I need and then get annoyed that people can't intuit what I need. They can tell you. My husband's also in the back. He can tell you. And then I'm like, did you not see all the ways I was hinting at it? And they're like, no, like we had other things going on. Couldn't you just name it? And I was like, You mean own my own needs and invite you to be part of my community and be helpful? Well, that sounds like a lot of internal work and therapy that I haven't gone through yet. So no, I'm going to need you to pick up on all my subtle hints and intuit. Again, goatness, right? But maybe they're right. Maybe also the goat were surrounded by other goats who didn't say when they needed something. Because how can you help somebody if no one ever names it? I don't know about you, but I come from a place where you better have your stuff done and figured out and be good so that you can be there for everybody else and not be a burden. Or maybe you're like me and you've felt at times like, oh, what if I name it and they don't show up, and then what do I do? So I'd rather not experience that vulnerability. And so I'm just going to keep it to myself and hope somebody picks up on the cues that I need help. And maybe the sheep were surrounded by other sheep who just had humble curiosity about life and a humble nature where they just kind of said, I need help. And other sheep were like, oh, me too, let's help each other. And they created an environment where being in need and helping just happened versus guilt and shame that were tied into it. Maybe their worth as a person wasn't tied into their need, and so it was okay to name it. These are pure speculations around why the sheep were sheep and the goats were goats. But it's how I see sometimes it being hard just to care for each other. Because if we don't name when we need help, it's hard for people to help. And if we always are looking for the qualifier or quantifier of why somebody is worthy of help or care, we miss the chances just to show up. My prayer is that you're sheep and not like me, a goat. But I trust that we worship a God that is gracious and bountiful, and you can be a sheep and a goat in any given day. So maybe when you notice a goat tendency coming up inside you, you might think of this sermon and my ma and go towards the ba. Because sometimes we need humor to lighten up a world that feels really complicated. Or in a world where there is so much need, it can feel like you are drowning in which to respond to. So maybe this is the invitation. Be surprised by a God who is ever present in every single face you see. Neither the sheep nor goat knew when Christ was before them. They just did. So maybe our invitation is to remember that the divine dwells in each and every one of us. And whenever there is one of us in front of the other, that is Christ in our midst. And that if we are bold enough and courageous enough to say that we need help, that people will be there to respond within the capacities and boundaries that they have to be well themselves. because the sheep didn't give until the sheep were slaughtered. So remember that. Christ does not call us to work ourselves to death, but to be in community with each other so that we never have to be taken advantage of, because we're in it together. And if you're waiting for some sign that the divine will return, look at the person sitting next to you, for the divine has already arrived and is before you. So maybe it's like forgiveness. Just do it. And if you struggle along the way, know that grace and mercy meet you. And may we all be surprised at the end of whatever life looks like, that we constantly saw the divine in each other and responded. Maybe it's that simple. But if you ever need a fellow goat, come and find me. For it takes a good bit to undo the quantifying and qualifying of what warrants help. So maybe you can help me be less goat-like, because you are my dear reminder, present in all that we do and in all of who you are. So go forth, go alike, knowing that God calls you beloved and invites you to live abundantly here and now, and not just what is to come. Amen.